journey there really began much earlier with my younger brother, Willie. Willie is my only sibling. He's 2 years younger than I am. He's 25 years old. He's brilliant, he's hilarious, and he's also on the autism spectrum. He lives with our parents in New Jersey, and while he does have some amazing gifts, he also has some tremendous challenges. And for Willie specifically, those challenges involve problems with aggressive behavior, self-injurious behavior, things that really seem at odds with the person that he is, the person that I truly know him to be. And he began having these struggles as a teenager. And so when I was in high school and getting straight A's and, you know, being on all these varsity teams, my brother was kicked out during his freshman year. And I just felt such a disparity between the life I was living and the life that he was living. And I didn't know how to help him. And my parents felt the same way, our parents felt the same way. And it was difficult to remember, you know, what life had been like before these meltdowns started. And we really began losing hope. We questioned whether or not he could continue to live at home with our family, if he was too much of a danger to himself and to us. And yet, even though all these things are true, he, along with others with special needs, have actually taught me more about what it means to love and accept oneself and each other than anyone else. So my brother Willie's expressions of love are different, and they are rare, especially as he struggles with these difficult behaviors. But that makes me treasure them all the more. And I see myself as kind of a detective, sort of an investigator into my brother's mind and heart. I look for these windows, I look for these moments where I can glimpse what's really going on inside his mind, because I know so often it's just a mystery. And a time when one such window opened for me was during the long ago era when he was obsessed with the Disney movie Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And he had all the stuffed animal figurines and he loved to line them up all in order. And he knew all the names in English and Italian, and he would watch this movie just constantly. And so therefore we had all seen it many times as well. And so one day my mom asked him, she said, you know, Willie, today are you happy or are you grumpy? Because he learned a lot about emotional states by watching the dwarfs, because they're all very consistently one emotion throughout the entire movie. And he was happy that day, and so he said, I'm happy. And my mom decided to try something different. She said, well, if you're happy, who am I? And he said right away, he picked up on exactly what she was doing, and he said, you are bashful. She said, bashful? Our mother is very extroverted, she's not bashful at all. But bashful is very kind and very thoughtful. And so in a way, you know, the ethos of bashful is kind of like her. And so she said, okay, if I'm bashful, who's daddy? He said, daddy is Doc. And that also seemed to fit, because my father's, you know, just a natural leader. He wears glasses and kind of has a quirky sense of humor, so this seemed to fit as well. And so she's like, okay, we're on a roll here. Who is your sister Caroline? And he, right away, again, he said, Caroline is Snow White. And here I thought he was going to say Dopey. So whenever I think of that, I just marvel at the fact that to my brother, I'm a Disney princess. You know, he may not ever say things unprompted to me like, I look up to you, or I'm really glad you're my sister. But he can cast me in a starring role in the movie in his mind. And I may not be able to see all that I would like to see of my brother's mind and his heart. But what I can see is incredible. He is funny and he is very generous with his casting. And so after this, I had a moment where I sat alone and I thought to myself, you know, maybe I can only see in part, because to see in full would be too much beauty for me to bear. And I think of St. Paul, who wrote that in this life we see through a glass darkly, but in the next we will see fully, that we will know fully, even as we are fully known. And that's what I hope for. I hope to know my brother fully and to communicate with him without barriers of ignorance on my part or autism on his part. And when I was a little girl, I did not have any kind of firm concept of God. It was before my family had ever gone to church that my brother was diagnosed with autism. But I do remember I had a very clear idea of what I believed that heaven would be. And I believed that heaven would be just very simply this: a place where I could talk to my brother without limits, where I could ask him all the questions I've always wanted the answers to, like, do you really like Cheerios? Is it really your favorite cereal? Or do you just eat it because that's what we eat every morning? You know, these insightful 5-year-old questions that I had in my mind. And during the time when Willie struggled most intensely with aggression and self-injury, the hardest thing wasn't just the behaviors, it wasn't just the black eyes and kicking holes through walls. It was wondering whether or not I would ever get more of those windows into Willie's true self. And so on one hand, my journey to L'Arche, I came to serve, I came to be of help to the adults with special needs who I live with. But on the other hand, I also came in a kind of desperate hope that I would see a kind of future for Willie, my brother, that seemed worth living. Because my brother, you know, he was kicked out of school, he was kicking holes through walls. I couldn't really see any kind of hopeful future for him. But when I came to L'Arche, I began to see how rich and helpful the life of an adult with special needs can be. And so if you're not familiar with it, L'Arche is French for the Ark. It's a faith-based nonprofit that provides homes where people with and without intellectual disabilities share life together. And when people ask, I usually just like to say that it is a group home as it is meant to be, where there are no staff and residents. It's one family, one unit, has dinners together, vacations together, and just does life together. And that's what my story, Amazing Gifts, is about. The simple yet profound act of just doing life together, listening to one another. In the words of Jean Vanier, the founder of L'Arche, the secret to L'Arche is relationship. Listening to people with their pain, their joy, their hope, their history. Listening to their heartbeats. So in the book, I wrote briefly about a time when those of us who were gathered around the L'Arche supper table were asked a question as part of our evening prayer. And that question was, what does it mean to be human? And at the time, I remember thinking, what kind of question is that? What kind of answers do you really expect us to give? Because the greatest minds in all of human history have wrestled with this question for time immemorial, and you really expect us to give you a substantial answer with, 2 minutes to think about it before the candle comes to our place as we're sitting at this table praying together. Well, I underestimated my housemates, and in particular, I underestimated my friend Michael, the man that I was assigned to accompany when I came to L'Arche. And accompaniers are sort of like one-on-ones, like the point person for everything from an individual's bank account balance to whether they have enough toothpaste, to where they go on vacation, just everything. And just to preface this, it's important to say that when I met Michael, I was convinced that this was not the right pairing for me because I was so intimidated by him. And I thought, we have nothing in common. Here's this man who's incredibly knowledgeable about history and the presidents and, all these things that I know nothing about. And he just seemed so confident to me, and I felt so not confident being a new assistant. And I let that intimidation get in the way, and I didn't think that we could be friends, really. But slowly but surely, through the daily acts of living together and supporting one another, we got to be friends. And it really humbled me to see how wrong I've been, to see that this person I thought I would never get along with turned out to be my dearest friend in L'Arche. And that fact, the fact of our friendship, in spite of all our differences, actually made Michael's response to this question, what does it mean to be human, very poignant for me. So, what does it mean to be human? And Michael, when he gets the candle, he kind of mumbles, he says, to be humble. To be human is to be humble. And then the person who was leading prayer said, okay, that's really interesting. What does it mean to you? What does it mean to be humble? What does that look like for you? And Michael sat and he thought about it for a while, and he said, I don't know, which is a great place to start. start. So I don't know, but I think it helps not to be afraid of your faults. And I just sat back in my chair and I was like, whoa. Not to be afraid of your faults. Not to be afraid of your weaknesses, things that might be considered disabilities. To accept yourself, faults and all. To accept yourself with love. That's what it means to be human. And I don't know about you, but most days I don't feel like I'm there yet. But I take heart because I know that I'm not alone in the journey. And whenever I do feel alone or afraid, I remember Michael's words, and I hope that you can do the same. Thank you.